Following Donald Trump's re-election as U.S. president, discussions intensified around potential shifts in American trade policies. Among the most debated proposals is Trump's plan to impose sweeping tariffs on imports, with a particular focus on goods from China. Such measures are anticipated to exacerbate already strained trade relations between the two nations. While the details of these policies remain unclear, a significant decline in U.S. China trade over recent years has already posed considerable challenges for American businesses reliant on the Chinese market. China has intentionally reduced its imports from the United States as part of a broader effort to diversify its supplier base and reduce dependency on American goods. This strategy has had a pronounced impact on key U.S. industries. Over the past 3 years, trade volumes between the two countries have dropped significantly. Recently, China also stopped buying copper scrap from the U.S., a major supply source. This video highlights 4 major sectors particularly affected by the reduction in China's imports from the United States. Before exploring these industries in detail, it is crucial to review the historical trajectory of U.S.-China relations. The relationship between the United States and China spans more than 2 centuries, characterized by alternating periods of collaboration, competition, and conflict. This overview outlines key developments in their geopolitical and economic interactions. The United States initiated direct trade with China on February 22, 1784, when the merchant ship Empress of China departed from New York Harbor, marking the nation's entry into the lucrative China trade. The vessel, also known as the Chinese Queen, was a 3-masted square-rigged ship of 360 tons, initially built in 1783 for service as a privateer after the Treaty of Paris formally ended the American Revolutionary War. The ship was refitted for commercial purposes. The Empress of China carried a diverse cargo, including 30 tons of ginseng, highly valued in China for its medicinal properties. The ship's captain, John Green, was a former U.S. naval officer, and the business agents or supercargoes, Samuel Shaw and Thomas Randall, were former officers in the U.S. Continental Army. The syndicate of owners included some of the wealthiest men in the new nation, such as Robert Morris. The ship arrived in Canton, modern-day Guangzhou, in August 1784, where the cargo was exchanged for Chinese goods like tea, silk, and porcelain. The Empress of China returned to New York on May 11, 1785, after a voyage of 14 months and 24 days. The success of this journey encouraged other American merchants to pursue trade with China, leading to the era known as the Old China Trade. Throughout the 19th century, the U.S. expanded its commercial presence in China. However, tensions arose during this period, notably during the Opium Wars, 1839 to 1860. Although the United States did not militarily participate in these conflicts, it benefited from their outcomes. In 1844, the Treaty of WWII was signed, representing the first formal agreement between the U.S. and China. This treaty granted the U.S. most favored nation status, ensuring equal privileges with other Western nations. It also provided extraterritorial rights, allowing U.S. citizens in China to be tried under American laws rather than Chinese jurisdiction. The Treaty of WWII opened new opportunities for American economic interests and missionary activities in China, granting access to 5 Chinese ports for trade and enabling Americans to buy land and establish churches and hospitals. The treaty also removed restrictions that previously prevented foreigners from learning the Chinese language, fostering greater cultural and commercial exchanges. During World War II, the United States significantly bolstered China's resistance against Japanese aggression through military aid, financial support, and the deployment of personnel, notably the Flying Tigers. This group, officially known as the First American Volunteer Group, AVG, of the Chinese Air Force, was formed in 1941 under the leadership of Claire Chennault, a retired U.S. Army Air Corps captain. Comprising pilots recruited from the U.S. military branches, the AVG was tasked with defending China and Burma, now Myanmar, against Japanese forces. Their distinctive shark-faced Curtiss P-40 Warhawk aircraft became emblematic of their daring missions. The Flying Tigers achieved their first combat victory on December 20, 1941. Downing 9 out of 10 Japanese bombers attacking Kunming, marking a significant morale boost for both American and Chinese forces. Following Japan's surrender in 1945, the Chinese Civil War between the nationalist Kuomintang (KMT) and the Communist Party of China (CPC) resumed. Despite U.S. support for the KMT, including military aid and advisory assistance, the CPC, led by Mao Zedong, gained the upper hand. By October 1, 1949, Mao proclaimed the establishment of the People's Republic of China, PRC, on the mainland, while the KMT under Chiang Kai-shek retreated to Taiwan, continuing to assert itself as the Republic of China, ROC. In the ensuing years, the United States grappled with its China policy amid the broader context of the Cold War and the strategy of containing communism. Initially, the U.S. maintained formal diplomatic recognition of the ROC in Taiwan as the legitimate government of all China, refusing to acknowledge the PRC. This stance was influenced by geopolitical considerations and the desire to support non-communist regimes. The U.S. provided economic and military assistance to Taiwan, reinforcing its position against potential PRC aggression. This policy persisted until the 1970s, when shifts in international relations led to the eventual normalization of U.S.-PRC relations. During the Cold War period from 1949 to 1971, the United States implemented policies to isolate communist nations, including the People's Republic of China. This strategy involved comprehensive trade embargoes that restricted the export of strategic materials and technology to China, aiming to limit its economic and political influence. The United States maintained a unilateral embargo until 1969, when the Nixon administration lifted restrictions on most trade to China, except for strategically important goods. Tensions between the United States and China escalated during the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, as both nations supported opposing sides in the conflict. This direct military confrontation deepened hostilities and solidified divisions between the two countries. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, trade restrictions remained in place. However, by the early 1970s, geopolitical shifts prompted the United States to pursue a policy of détente, leading to improved relations. In April 1971, the United States lifted its trade embargo with China, which had been in place since the start of the Korean War. This policy shift culminated in President Richard Nixon's historic visit to China in 1972, marking a significant step toward normalizing diplomatic relations between the two nations. Rapprochement and normalization from 1971 to 1979 marked a pivotal shift in United States-China relations, beginning with President Richard Nixon's groundbreaking visit to the People's Republic of China in February 1972. This visit, the first by a sitting United States president to the PRC, initiated a thaw in bilateral relations after decades of estrangement. During the visit, President Nixon met with Chairman Mao Zedong and Premier Zhou Enlai, engaging in discussions that culminated in the issuance of the Shanghai Communiqué on February 27, 1972. This joint statement outlined a framework for future cooperation, acknowledging existing differences, particularly concerning Taiwan, while expressing mutual desires to work toward normalization of relations. A significant development occurred on December 15, 1978, when President Jimmy Carter announced that the United States would formally recognize the PRC, effective January 1, 1979. This decision entailed severing official diplomatic ties with the Republic of China, Taiwan, and acknowledging the government in Beijing as the sole legal government of China. However, to maintain substantive relations with Taiwan, the United States Congress enacted the Taiwan Relations Act on April 10, 1979. The TRA established a legal framework for unofficial relations, facilitating continued economic and cultural exchanges, and authorizing the provision of defensive arms to Taiwan. This act aimed to preserve peace, security, and stability in the Western Pacific, reflecting the United States' commitment to Taiwan's security, despite the absence of formal diplomatic ties. These diplomatic maneuvers in the 1970s laid the groundwork for the complex and multifaceted relationship between the United States and China that persists today, balancing cooperation and competition across various domains. Let's take a quick pause. If you've enjoyed the video so far, could we ask a small favor? Hitting the like button helps us reach a broader audience, and sharing your thoughts or feedback in the comments makes an even bigger impact. Thank you for watching. Now let's dive back in. Economic engagement from the 1980s to the 2000s. In the late 1970s, under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping, China initiated a series of market-oriented reforms that transformed its economy. These reforms included the decollectivization of agriculture, the opening of the country to foreign investment, and the privatization of state-owned enterprises. The first stage, in the late 1970s and early 1980s, involved the decollectivization of agriculture, the opening up of the country to foreign investment, and permission for entrepreneurs to start businesses. The second stage, in the late 1980s and 1990s, involved the privatization and contracting out of much state-owned industry. These reforms created significant opportunities for foreign investment, and American businesses were quick to capitalize on China's vast labor force and emerging consumer market. This led to a surge in bilateral trade, with United States companies establishing manufacturing operations in China to take advantage of lower production costs and to access the growing Chinese market. A pivotal moment in United States-China economic relations occurred in 2001 when China joined the World Trade Organization. This accession required China to implement significant trade liberalization measures, including reducing tariffs, eliminating trade barriers, and opening various sectors to foreign competition. As a result, trade between the two nations expanded rapidly. By 2019, trade in goods between the United States and China had increased from less than $100 billion in 1999 to $100 billion in 1999 to $558 billion. China's accession to the WTO also had a profound impact on its domestic economy. It accelerated China's integration into the global economy, leading to unprecedented economic growth and lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. However, it also presented challenges, including increased competition for domestic industries and the need for significant legal and regulatory reforms to comply with WTO rules. Strategic competition. 2010. By the 2010s, U.S. China relations became increasingly strained due to concerns over China's trade practices, particularly allegations of intellectual property theft and enforced technology transfers. The U.S. accused China of compelling American companies operating within its borders to share proprietary technologies with local partners as a prerequisite for market access. These practices were perceived as undermining fair competition and disadvantaging U.S. businesses. In response, the Trump administration initiated a trade war in 2018, imposing tariffs on approximately $100 billion over 2 years. Despite these commitments, the agreement left several critical issues unresolved, including China's industrial policies, the role of state-owned enterprises, and cybersecurity concerns. Moreover, China's actual purchases fell short of the targets set in the agreement, partly due to the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Recent trends in U.S. China trade 2021-2024. Trade relations between the United States and China have experienced notable fluctuations in recent years. In 2023, U.S. exports to China amounted to approximately $34.05 billion worth of U.S. agricultural products, marking a 20% decrease from the previous year. This decline is attributed to China's strategic diversification of its import sources and the lingering effects of trade tensions. Let's now talk about the key sectors affected by declining trade. Agricultural products. China has substantially reduced its dependence on U.S. agricultural imports, notably soybeans and corn, by turning to alternative suppliers such as Brazil. In the first 2 months of 2024, China's soybean imports from Brazil surged 21% year-on-year, reaching 6.96 million metric tons, while imports from the U.S. decreased to 4.96 million tons from 9.71 million tons in the same period the previous year. Similarly, Brazil has become China's leading corn supplier, further diminishing the U.S. share in this market. Technology and electronics. Amid escalating trade tensions and U.S. export controls, China has intensified efforts to bolster its domestic semiconductor industry. In 2023, China's semiconductor imports declined by 14.6% year-on-year in the first 9 months, totaling 35.59 billion units, down from 46.7 billion in the same period in 2022. This reduction reflects China's commitment to achieving technological self-sufficiency and reducing reliance on U.S. semiconductor imports. China's imports of scrap copper are anticipated to decline significantly as traders halt purchases from the United States, its primary supplier. Amid escalating trade tensions under President Donald Trump's administration, the U.S. has threatened to impose a 60% tariff on Chinese imports, with an additional 10% tariff announced recently, prompting concerns over potential retaliatory measures from Beijing. In the first 10 months of the year, China imported a significant amount of scrap copper, but exact figures are unavailable in the report data and could contribute to copper price volatility. In response to the anticipated shortfall, Beijing has allowed more recycled copper imports starting November 15th, aiming to promote recycling and reduce dependence on primary raw materials. This policy adjustment underscores China's efforts to mitigate the impact of trade tensions on its industrial supply chains. The broader context includes President Trump's nomination of Scott Bessent as Treasury Secretary and Jamieson Greer as U.S. Trade Representative, both of whom are expected to support the administration's aggressive tariff policies. These developments have heightened market uncertainty, influencing commodity markets and global trade dynamics. The suspension of U.S. scrap copper imports by China, driven by escalating trade tensions, carries significant implications for the U.S. economy. Scrap copper has historically been a major export for the U.S., with China as its largest buyer. A decline in exports to China reduces revenue for American scrap processors and exporters, with recent trade accounting for nearly 20% of the total market. This drop could result in millions of dollars in lost income. U.S. recycling firms face reduced demand, leading to inventory buildups and potential closures of smaller businesses unable to find alternative markets. Job losses in regions heavily reliant on exports are also a concern. Energy. China has diversified its liquefied natural gas imports, increasingly sourcing from countries like Australia, Qatar, and Russia, thereby decreasing its dependence on U.S. energy exports. In the first 10 months of 2024, China imported 63% more LNG from the U.S. compared to the same period in 2023, positioning the U.S. as China's fifth-largest LNG supplier. However, China's long-term contracts and strategic partnerships with other major LNG producers indicate a deliberate move to secure energy supplies from diverse sources, reducing potential vulnerabilities associated with over-reliance on any single country. These strategic shifts underscore China's efforts to mitigate risks associated with geopolitical tensions and trade disputes, aiming to enhance economic resilience by diversifying its import portfolio across critical sectors. Conclusion. The U.S. tariff policies targeting China have inadvertently harmed the American economy more than they have impacted China. By imposing higher tariffs on Chinese imports, the U.S. has triggered increased costs for domestic consumers and businesses, disrupting supply chains and raising prices for goods. These challenges have undermined the competitiveness of American industries, particularly manufacturing, which has faced higher input costs, job losses, and reduced investment. In response, China has strategically reduced imports of U.S. goods, significantly impacting sectors like agriculture. By diversifying its import sources and expanding trade relationships with other nations, China has mitigated its reliance on U.S. products, cushioning its economy against the tariffs. Meanwhile, U.S. exporters reliant on Chinese demand, such as soybean and corn producers, have been left vulnerable, highlighting the uneven burden of the trade war. Rather than revitalizing U.S. industries or reducing the trade deficit, the tariffs have shifted imports to other countries without boosting domestic production. This policy has exposed the vulnerabilities of the U.S. economy in an interconnected global trade system, emphasizing that protectionist measures often carry unintended consequences that outweigh their intended benefits. The ongoing strain on U.S.-China relations underscores the need for a more balanced and cooperative trade strategy. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching this video. We sincerely appreciate you joining us today. If our content resonated with you or sparked inspiration, please consider expressing your support by liking it and subscribing to stay connected with our community. Your support holds immense value for us. You can watch another video of our channel, which is now on the screen.